What's up, YouTube? Brett Hoover from Rants here. Alright, so did Dune director Denis Villeneuve actually throw shade at Star Wars? Kind of. Yes and no. Um, Look, he's trying to say, hey, you know what? Star Wars lost its seriousness and elegance after The Empire Strikes Back. Did it? Um, as a Star Wars fan, um, yes, I would say it kind of did because, when you think of the prequels, you have, um, kind of like Jar Jar Binks characters. You could tell that there was a lot of ways that it really didn't try to take itself seriously. And then, of course, then you have the sequel series or trilogy, and you have Luke Skywalker drinking that space cow's milk. There was some little scenes in there that was kind of meant to be comical. Definitely wasn't as impactful um, as what it could have been. It kind of tried to play a little bit on that MCU kind of humor that's so popular nowadays. So to a certain extent, yes, I would maybe agree that the seriousness did kind of come out of it after The Empire Strikes Back. Now, The Empire Strikes Back is by far at least my favorite Star Wars film. Does it look dated now? Of course it looks dated now. That whole original trilogy looks dated. But as far as story-wise goes, it's head above heels better than the prequel trilogy and, of course, sequel trilogy. Which, look, I kind of felt in a lot of ways when I was watching the sequel trilogy, it itself didn't take itself seriously. It was all about identity politics. It was about not giving you layered characters. There was a lot of things that it was trying to do, but give you characters that would last throughout the ages. And as far as movies and movie franchises are concerned, I would go so far to say this. There's few franchises that really stand out, that really last the course of time. I'm thinking of like Star Trek, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Those are movies, especially Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, that Dune compares itself to. And gives, especially in the case of, and fully in the case of Star Wars, it gives itself credit for, Star Wars really being a copy of Dune in a lot of different ways. So, and there is comparisons that can be made. But is Dune a more serious film than what Star Wars really ever was after The Empire Strikes Back? Um, I could see it. I'm not going to argue necessarily against that. I feel like Star Wars, from even Star Wars fans, are like, oh, these, like you take the Clone Wars. You have a lot of Star Wars fans that were of the older generation. They're like, I'm not going to watch that. That's for kids. That it's not for adults. It's not adult related. Those, I would say, the Clone Wars and Rebels were more geared towards adults than they were kids in a lot of ways. More brutal killings, the more really dark storylines were really in those series more than it ever was in the movies. So I would say the Clone Wars took itself very seriously. I kind of feel like Rebels, to a certain extent, took itself seriously. I feel like The Bad Batch, even though I'm not a huge fan of it, takes itself seriously. The Mandalorian, of course, tries to be cute in a lot of different ways. But I feel like there is, still seriousness in Star Wars. Whether it lives up to the seriousness and the impactfulness of Dune, I don't know. I'd never read the Dune novels. I only can go through what I saw in the movie. And as for what I saw in the movie, I mean, there's no doubt it's geared fully and totally towards adults. Period. Period. It's meant to be dark. It's meant to be kind of disturbing in a little way. Something that Star Wars never was meant to be. But let's go ahead and let's see if Denis Villeneuve actually throws shade upon Star Wars, or if it's just him just giving his random opinions. It says during the promotion of his latest film, Dune director Denis Villeneuve recently discussed Frank Roberts' novel influencing George Lucas, but also how Star Wars influenced his adaptation of Dune. He goes on to Villeneuve comments about Star Wars and Dune came in a discussion with the playlist Rodrigo Perez. Perez would broach the subject of Star Wars, telling Villeneuve, "I'll try not to disparage the maestro, Mr. Lynch, and move on. Yet it's interesting all this stuff about talking about the real depth of Dune, the cultures, the religions. It reminds me of a comment you made a long time ago about Dune and wanting to make a Star Wars for adults. And it's funny, Star Wars has all that, religion, politics, etc. But it's just far less sophisticated compared to Herbert's consideration of the same idea." Like I said, I never read the novels, but as far as what I saw in the movie, I would somewhat agree with that. And then it just basically goes on. It says that there's a link, of course. I discovered Dune after having seen the first Star Wars and probably after seeing Empire. So those movies, the fact that I was drawn into a book like Dune probably had something major to do with loving Star Wars, he stated. He continued, now it's interesting to know that as everybody knows, Star Wars, in a way, is a very interesting Dune adaptation because George Lucas was deeply inspired himself from Dune, and here I was having to try to make a new adaptation of Dune, but having to deal with the white elephant in the room, which is Star Wars, meaning that it was a kind of full circle echo. And you know what? I can see that, Dune inspired George Lucas, and then George Lucas inspired Villeneuve. Star Wars being influenced by Dune, and us making a movie about Dune and being influenced by Star Wars, it was an interesting way of seeing things. He goes on to state, then discuss the seriousness of Empire Strikes Back. There's something about the Empire Strikes Back, the darkness of it, the tragic elements of it, the way I was feeling in that precise moment about Star Wars. There was something really serious about it that I deeply loved. It goes on to just talk about Blade Runner. And it says the director then claims they lost the seriousness and elegance following The Empire Strikes Back. So there was something in The Empire Strikes Back, in its darkness, in the way it was approaching the psychological path of Luke Skywalker. And I just feel like they lost that after they lost that elegance. He elaborated, and that was maybe something that I was referring to when I said, oh, I wish Dune was, in a way, my idea was to back to that early Star Wars spirit. Villeneuve concluded, joking, "You must not publish that. I'm going to be crucified." But I totally believe that. I never left Star Wars. Star Wars left me. As an adult, I probably love Star Wars now more than I ever did as a kid. As a kid, I was a huge fan of it. But as an adult, I see more of the depth of it. And I'm not necessarily, as a fan, going off of the movies. I'm talking about, the Star Wars extended universe, whether it be comics, whether, that are now in Legends, that, the series, all of that. I see it for what it is in that regard. And there's some that is darker than others. So I feel like when Villeneuve is speaking about it kind of lost him, I feel like maybe the movies did lose him. The movies, like I said, going back to the prequel trilogy, going back to even the sequel trilogy, those movies, to a certain extent, weren't serious. And by serious, I'm not talking about that they didn't have serious moments in them. They did. They did, in some ways, have really dark moments. But at the same time, the overall aspect of the movie was not really meant to be controversial. It wasn't meant to be thought provoking in any form or fashion. It was meant to be a nice popcorn flick and to carry on the legend of Star Wars so that they could continue making money off of it. I feel like the series, actually, if he would have paid attention to the series and watched a little bit of them, like I said, the Clone Wars, even in Rebels to a certain extent, I feel like if he would have watched those, he would have maybe seen a more darker side. He would have seen more of that elegance, that brilliance, that adult theme kind of stuff in those series more than what he would the movie. So I would say I agree with him when it comes to the movie. I kind of feel like Star Wars has lost its elegance in a lot of ways, and to a certain extent, when it comes to movies, it's lost me in a lot of ways. But as far as Star Wars overall, I would say no. There's still some really interesting, good things that Star Wars is actually has out there. I would point to the Clone Wars, Rebels, The Mandalorian to a certain extent, even though it can be cheesy. There is some, adult elegance to that. It's not just about kids, it's about, kind of pushing the narrative a little bit, not to the extreme, but I didn't really feel like Dune really did that either. Of course, I'm just going by the movie. I'm not talking about the novels because I don't know anything about the novels. But as far as, seeing what he says, I agree and disagree with him at the same time. But I think it's an interesting take. I think that it's maybe a question that needs to be pondered. I think it is, how does let's say Dune, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, how do they compare to each other? Brilliance wise, elegant wise, longevity wise. How do they compare to each other in that regard? And I think that's a debate that later generations will actually probably be having about which franchise actually, was successful in all those categories. And who knows, Dune might be the one that everybody's talking about in 20 years. And not Lord of the Rings and not Star Wars. I mean, I could see to a certain extent a possibility where that could actually come true. But anyways, guys, let me know what y'all think. Do you feel like, Star Wars did kind of lose its elegance after The Empire Strikes Back? Do you agree with the Dune director when it comes to that? Do you think that Dune has more adult themed concepts to it compared to Star Wars? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Y'all take care.